Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7 with me, Sam Paton, sitting once again in the comfort of my living room. And for tonight's bulletins, first of all, the coronavirus update. As of 2 p.m. today, a total of 1,705,020 people in Scotland have been tested through the NHS Scotland labs and the UK Government regional testing centres since the start of the pandemic. Of these, 1,500,467 have been confirmed negative, 204,553 have tested positive. There are 498 new confirmed cases of COVID-19. This will be an underestimate of the number of cases. Not everyone with the virus will display symptoms, and not all those with symptoms will be tested. There were 11 new reported deaths of people who have tested positive. The number of patients in Scotland who have died from complications caused by the coronavirus COVID-19 infection now stands at 7,409 people. This number only includes those who have died having received a positive test for the virus in the previous 28 days. Of the people who have tested positive, 666 were in hospital last night, 64 of whom were in intensive care. As of 8 a.m. today, 1,717,672 people had received their first dose of the COVID-19 vaccination and 108,197 had received their second dose. The latest UK figures have been delayed and have not yet been published as we came on air. So hopefully when we get them, we'll pop them up on social media for you. And for the next story of this evening, Boris Johnson accused of misleading Parliament over COVID contracts. 3 days after the High Court ruled government had acted unlawfully by failing to publish COVID contracts, Boris Johnson stood up in the House of Commons and reassured MPs and the public that all COVID-related contracts were on the record. However, the final order handed down by the judge today shows that what the Prime Minister told the House was not true. The judge in the Good Law Project's judicial review of the UK Government COVID contracts confirmed the defendant has published 608 out of 708 relevant contracts for supply services relating to COVID-19, awarded on or before the 7th of October 2020. In some or all of these cases, the defendant acted unlawfully by failing to publish the contracts within the period set out in the Crown Commercial Services publication of Central Government Tenders and Contracts. Central Government Transparency Guidance Note, November 2017. The judge's order is based on the government's own figures, so at the time as Johnson was falsely reassuring MPs, government lawyers were preparing a statement contradicting him, revealing 100 contracts and dozens of contract award notices were missing from the public record. Over the course of our judicial review, government made no less than 4 attempts to provide an accurate witness statement setting out the number of contracts and contract award notices that had been published late, and they kept getting it wrong. As late as the hearing itself, they said they had published 28% of the contract award notices within the 30-day legal limit. When asked by the judge to follow up with evidence of the figures so he could make his final order, it transpired that the government had actually only published 3% of the CANS in the legal time frame. Now for the next story, once again down in England. Prime Minister facing calls for number 10 accounts to be published. SNP has demanded that Boris Johnson publish all the accounts related to the refurbishment of his Downing Street flat, which is expected to cost in the excess of £200,000. The Prime Minister had reportedly claimed he was struggling to fund the measure despite an annual salary of £150,000 and will now have a Tory benefactor run a slush fund on his behalf. The news comes only 2 days after the Tories cut public sector pay and failed to make the lifeline £20 a week universal credit uplift permanent in their budget, while offering only a 1% pay increase to NHS staff in England. Commenting, SNP Shadow Leader of the House, Pete Wishart MP, said, "Boris Johnson never fails to amaze me. Only 2 days ago, he and his Tory counterparts failed to make the universal uplift permanent, which could have went a long way in helping the 4.2 million children living in poverty in the UK." Now for our next story. Pope Francis begins the first trip by a pontiff to Iraq. Pope Francis, beginning the first trip by a pontiff to Iraq, made an impassioned call on Friday to end the militant violence and religious strife that has plagued the country for decades, saying peacemakers should finally be given a chance. May the clash of arms be silenced. May there be an end to the acts of violence and extremism, he said, addressing the Iraqi President Barham Salih, the politicians and diplomats at the presidential palace. Francis arrived at Baghdad airport under tight security after telling reporters on his plane that he felt duty-bound to make the emblematic trip to the country has been mattered for so many years. In his speech at the palace, Francis criticised factional and foreign interests that have destabilised Iraq and the wider region and hit ordinary people the hardest. The Pope's whirlwind tour will take him by plane, helicopter and cars to 4 cities, including areas that most foreign dignitaries are unable to reach, let alone in such a short space of time. He will say Mass at Baghdad Church, meet the Iraq's top Shiite Muslim cleric in southern city of Najaf, and travel north to Mosul, where the army had to empty the streets for security reasons last year for a visit by Iraq's Prime Minister. The pontiff will also visit the birthplace of Prophet Abraham, who is revered by Christians, Muslims and Jews, and even meet the Iraq's reverend top Shiite Muslim cleric, 90-year-old Grand Ayatollah Ali Sistani. Right, now for our next story of this evening. The Windrush victim denied UK citizenship despite Home Office admitting error. A man who was prevented from returning home to the UK for 9 years by the Windrush scandal has been refused British citizenship because of his protracted absence from the country, despite an acknowledgement from the Home Secretary that the government was to blame. The case highlights the Home Office failure to provide justice in some of those affected, almost 3 years since ministers promised to right the wrongs caused by the immigration scandal. Trevor Donald, 65, received a letter from Priti Patel in which she expressed her regret at the rigidity of immigration legislation means he cannot be granted British citizenship. The law requires applicants to have been physically present in the UK for the majority of the 5 years preceding their application. Donald said the latest refusal was ridiculous and painful and expressed anger at the continued precariousness of his situation. It is a blow. They should have rectified the situation years ago, he said. The way the system has been treating me and people is wrong. Donald was stranded in Jamaica for 9 years after travelling there to attend his mother's funeral in 2010. At that point, he had been living in Britain for 43 years, arriving as an 11-year-old child to live in Birmingham legally in 1967. He was entitled to citizenship but applied formally for leave to remain only when his mother became ill and he needed to get a passport so he could visit her. His application was unsuccessful because he did not have enough evidence to prove he had lived in the UK for more than 4 decades. His mother died before he was granted a passport, but he travelled to the funeral using emergency documents, having been reassured by a Home Office official that he would be allowed to re-enter the UK. However, he was denied permission to return later that year. He was only allowed back 9 years later in 2019, when Home Office staff working for the Windrush task force contacted him and apologised and paid for him to fly home to Britain. And for her next story, closer to home, international approaches to drug law reform. The Scottish Government have today published a study reviewing of the international evidence on approaches to drug law reform, focusing on case studies from Australia, Canada, Denmark, Portugal and the Netherlands. The study seeks to support the ongoing development of innovative approaches to reducing drug harms by identifying the impact of interventions abroad and situating them within their legal context. Welcoming the study, Minister for Drugs Policy Angela Constance said, "We support the considerable body of evidence behind taking a public health approach to addressing the harm caused by drugs. However, the justice system's ability to reorient its approach towards people who use drugs is often constrained by the current UK law." The study will help to inform Scotland's approach to the ongoing development of innovative approaches within the current law by identifying successful interventions abroad and situating them within their legal context. It will also help in the process of identifying the changes we would want to make with the Misuse of Drugs Act 1971. We also recognise that Scotland has its own unique set of challenges and we cannot simply import one model or approach from another country, even if we were able to do so under current legislation. The Scottish Government has been consistently clear in its support for safe drug consumption rooms, and this study shows strong evidence from other countries that these facilities help prevent fatal overdoses and encourage people who use drugs to access longer-term help. However, as we work to find solutions to the barriers which prevent us from implementing these, we are focusing on what can be done now within the current law to reduce harm and stop people dying. For example, heroin-assisted treatment. And still back at home, employers back the Young Persons Guarantee. Employers across Scotland continue to sign up to the Young Persons Guarantee, increasing opportunities for every 16 to 24-year-old in the wake of the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic. ScotRail, Scottish Power, Scottish Water, Morgan Stanley, BAE Systems and Social Security Scotland are among the latest employers to make the pledge, which asks employers to commit to preparing young people for the world of work through engaging with education, work experience and work-based learning opportunities, engaging with and providing opportunities to young people who face barriers to work, creating apprenticeships, training and upskilling opportunities for young people, creating jobs and opportunities for young people, creating an inclusive workplace to enable young people to meet their potential. The guarantee aims to give all young people the chance to succeed, despite the economic impacts of COVID-19, while also ensuring employers continue to benefit from fresh talent and new perspectives that young people bring to the workplace across Scotland. Now we're heading over to America for our next story. Debate is underway in the US Senate on Biden's £1.9 trillion COVID relief bill. In Washington today, a sharply divided US Senate has begun a contentious debate on $1.9 trillion coronavirus aid bill that is President Joe Biden's first major legislative initiative, with Democrats pressing ahead without any Republican support. The Senate voted on Thursday to take up the bill in a party line of 51-50 vote, with the Democratic Vice President Kamala Harris breaking the tie. But the Republicans delayed the start of the debate by forcing a several hours long reading of the full text of the 628-page measure. The Senate will debate the bill 3 hours today before considering a multitude of amendments, which could require a marathon voting session before taking a vote on final passage in a process that could extend into the weekend. Republicans are expected to use procedural manoeuvres to slow the process. If the Senate approves the bill, it will have to be sent back to the Democratic-controlled House of Representatives for final passage. Democrats hope Biden can sign the bill into law before March the 14th, when some of the current benefits run out. And staying with over in America, Congressman sues Trump over the deadly Capitol siege. A Democratic congressman has sued Donald Trump and his lawyer Rudy Giuliani and other allies of former president over the deadly attack on the US Capitol when violent Trump supporters tried to stop the certification of Trump's election defeat. The civil lawsuit, filed at a federal court in Washington, alleges that the attack, which left 5 dead, including a police officer, was a direct and foreseeable consequence of the unlawful actions by Trump, Giuliani, Trump's eldest son, Giuliani. See, I'm renaming everybody here again. Giuliani, Trump's eldest son, Donald Trump Jr., and Republican Congressmen Mo Brooks and others. As such, the defendants are responsible for the inquiry and destruction that followed, said Representative Eric Swalwell, who filed the lawsuit. Swalwell was one of the impeachment managers who last month attempted to persuade the US Senate to block Trump from holding office again, saying Trump incited the violence. The Senate voted to acquit Trump. The lawsuit draws on evidence from the impeachment trial, including Trump tweets leading up to the attack, and details the former president's efforts to pressure state lawmakers to halve President Joe Biden's victory. Swalwell's lawsuit alleges Trump and his allies broke US law that prohibits conspiracies to violate civil rights. The lawsuit seeks monetary damages against defendants, including punitive damages. Jessica Levinson, a professor at Loyola's Law School in Los Angeles, says Swalwell's lawsuit was not a slam dunk, but might eventually result in Trump sitting for an interview under oath. Now, and back across to Europe. The EU says the pandemic disproportionately affects women, especially in frontline jobs. Women in European countries have been disproportionately affected by the coronavirus pandemic because they make up the vast majority of workers in health and other frontline jobs, an EU report said today. The pandemic has also brought a rise in domestic violence against women, the EU's annual report on gender equality said. The COVID-19 pandemic has disproportionately affected women's lives, it read. There are already ample evidence that the hard-won achievements of the past years have been rolled back. Progress on women's rights is hard won but easily lost. The report says health risks to women have increased as their workload and challenges to their work-life balance. Women also took on more care responsibilities in lockdowns. This has weighed on women's safety, with domestic violence rising during Europe's first lockdown in the spring of 2020, according to the report. Women also filled more jobs than men, which required personal contact, and have been hit the hardest by restrictions introduced to curb the spread of the coronavirus. Women overrepresentation in lower paid sectors and occupations such as hospitality, retail and personal services make them particularly vulnerable in the labour markets struck by COVID-19 crisis. Female employment in the EU dropped slightly more than male employment early on in the pandemic, and women have since had more difficulties finding new jobs. In contrast, service sectors that were not as disrupted due to the nature of their activity, such as information and communication, finance and insurance, primarily employing men, saw an increase in employment rates, the report said. It warned that trends could lead to lower pensions for women, widening the gender pension gap and other inequalities for decades to come. Now, sticking with the workplace and COVID, workplace COVID testing expanded. Food production and processing businesses are being urged to sign up for routine staff testing to identify cases of coronavirus COVID-19. Keep workforces safe and break chains of transmission. The free lateral flow antigen test kits are available to eligible businesses, which are essential to maintain an adequate supply of food for the nation, and where outbreaks risks can be higher due to the working environment, such as abattoirs, meat and seafood processing facilities and dairies, as well as food distribution businesses. A number of businesses have already signed up as early adopters, including critical businesses such as Cooper Angus Poultry Plant and a number of seafood processors in Grampian, some of which have been affected by the COVID outbreaks. Now for a wee good news story, and I'm sure you will all like this. The Scots language added to Spotify. Music streaming giant Spotify has agreed to add Scots to its list of recognised languages following a public campaign led by award-winning folk singer Iona Fife. Claire Adamson, the SNP MSP for Motherwell and Wishaw, said she was delighted with the news. Miss Adamson had laid down parliamentary motion in support of the campaign last year and wrote to the CEO of Spotify, Daniel Eck. Scots is one of Scotland's 3 national languages with over 1.5 million speakers according to the 2011 census. Scots is also included in the European Charter for Minority Languages. The platform hosts other minority languages including Manx, Irish Gaelic, Cornish, Welsh and Scottish Gaelic. The absence meant that Scots music has been incorrectly categorised for years. Iona Fife said it is a big step forward to be able to pressure the global company to change their language policy and add Scots as a language. Being able to categorise my songs under the correct language of Scots means so much to me and many other singers. And once we achieve a Scots Language Act, the legislation will place responsibility onto other companies to correctly recognise the language. And that is just a great news story. I absolutely love that because my wee one insists on speaking Scots all the time, including at school. So there we go, that's us for this evening. Thank you very much for tuning in. And once again, this is where I ask you to please support us here at Broadcasting Scotland, whether you would like to donate, and you can subscribe by doing that. There's the link here, if you can see it just below my finger. There we go. You can actually subscribe £5 a month, which is less than a TV license, or you can just make a donation. All this helps us to keep the lights on, keeps the programmes running, and we are also trying to raise money so that we can start employing a couple of staff as well here at Broadcasting Scotland. Now, the other thing I'm going to ask help for is we need help, we need volunteers, people to help us out with presenting or behind the scenes or researching. There are so many jobs that you can do, and it doesn't matter if you think you can't do it. You can. I can do this, and yes, I can sometimes get names muddled up and things. It's, at the end of the day, we're all friends, and it's a great way to build your confidence. So please get in contact, and we've got the elections coming up as well in May, so we really, really, really desperately need some extra bodies to help us out. And again, the contact details are on your screen. So that leaves me to say thank you very much for watching. Please spread the word and share our shows, and please get involved. It is a great way to get news relevant to Scotland out there. And once again, thank you.
What distinguishes Broadcasting Scotland from a website or blog, apart from our brilliant programmes?
Hi there, I'm Gordon Ross.
Are the costs we face to enable us to produce those programmes. These costs are significant and ongoing. However, our facilities are able to do so much more if only we had the staff. In the last year, some of our supporters have cancelled their subscriptions. In one way, we would prefer it if it was because they didn't like us, rather than it being because of the financial pressures which we are all under because of COVID. The really positive outcome of our fundraiser is that at a time of economic challenge in Scotland, we will use your donations to create jobs and in a small way contribute to improving the Scottish economy. If you want us to be Scotland's independent broadcaster, able to provide an alternative mainstream television platform, then please support us.
Scotland is going to be an independent country.
Just imagine what we could do if we had even 1% of the BBC Scotland channel's budget. Imagine. And then please consider turning your imagination into reality. Please support us if you can afford it.